Hello, welcome back. This is episode 19 of the Gita Decoded. We are still on chapter 4, and Sister Denise was just sharing her views on verse 13, and we're now moving on to verse 14. Sister Denise, a very warm welcome back.
Thank you.
I want to read to you the last line of verse 13, which flows into 14, and I'd like you to tell me what it means to you. No, although I am the creator of the system, know me to be the eternal non-doer. Actions do not taint me. I have no desire for the fruit of action. Thus, he who comprehends me is not bound by actions. My first question about that is that if you go through the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita and hear what God says about his job or his vocation, he does something. He's conversing with Arjuna, which in my mind is itself an action. So what does it mean to be the eternal non-doer? Not just that he doesn't do, but he never does anything. So I find that noteworthy, and I'd like you to explain that to us. And it goes on to say that actions do not taint me.
You know, there are these expressions, akarma, and it's all throughout the translation that we have of the Gita interpreted as non-action. And there is the expression for God that he is akarta, asochta, abhokta, which refers to 14 and 15. So akarta means doesn't do anything. Abhokta means nothing happens to him as a result of any action. And asochta means doesn't think, you see, because thinking is the most subtle form of action. We have to interpret it not to mean that he doesn't do anything, experience anything, or think anything, but that the karma that he doesn't have any consequences which limit him.
Sister Denise, this law only applies to God.
Yes.
So a human being cannot be a non-doer.
No, because a human soul must take birth in order to perform, and by performing, that human soul is bound. If you perform good karma, you are bound to receive good fruit. If you perform bad karma, you are bound to pay for that, the price of that negative action. God is karmatit, you see. So this word karmatit is a very interesting one, that completely independent of the consequences of karma. So God is not a human. If God does something, it is for humanity. God doesn't need anything. God is called, and you find this in the Christian Bible very much, this idea of the immutable one. God is changeless. What karma does is it changes a person. Because if you do good karma, it makes you wealthier. If you do bad karma, it makes you poorer. And so you're different, and it also leaves the sanskaras. So for God, God has the sanskaras of knowledge. And when God comes into action, it is simply to tell the knowledge. If you see in the context of the Gita, you have Krishna in the chariot of Arjuna as the charioteer, and he will not do any fighting, but he will run the chariot, he will hold the reins of the horses, and he will give instructions to Arjuna on the battlefield about the philosophy of karma. God is bound to give knowledge, because the problem for humanity is ignorance. And God is the knowledgeful one. And the only way that God's qualities can be known by anyone is if they're manifest. Which means God has to act, but not act in such a way that there's bondage of action. So it's quite difficult for people, normally to interpret this, to understand this, because a human being cannot understand any being who is higher than a human being. God is higher than a human being. So the only way that a human being can know God is if God describes himself to a human being. Here we have God saying, this is my relationship with karma. I am a karmatit soul, and I come into action for you. I do not get anything out of this. I do not get the kingdom. You get the kingdom. I don't have any problems. You have problems. I'm your resource person. And so he's called Deus ex machina. He's outside the machinery. It is described in this way, but we have to interpret it. We have to understand what that actually means.
The next shloka that was of interest to me is a question. What is action and what is inaction? And it goes on to say, even the wise are confused in this matter. God says to Arjuna, I'm going to explain this to you, and once you understand it, you shall be released from evil. What does that mean, to be released from evil?
Karma and akarma. When you put an A in front of a word, it negates it. So karma is action, but pure action. What constitutes pure action? What kind of consciousness you have to have, etc., for it to be pure action. In Brahma Kumaris Rajyoga, we never say akarma means non-action. We say there is sukarma, pure action, vikarma, impure action, and akarma is neutral action. Why it says that people don't understand about this, people get confused about this, because they can't imagine what would be an action that doesn't have any consequences. And then this is why also it brings in the idea of action that is sacrifice. Because an action that is done under the instructions of God, for God, in the consciousness of being an instrument, is about the closest thing you can get to an action which is the most neutral. We also look at this idea of according to the gunas, when your soul is in a pure state, your sato pradhan soul, in the golden age, the Satyuga, the world of truth, and there your karma is neutral. Because the fruit of what you did in the previous confluence age is such that you are almost on automatic pilot, and that continues for 21 births. And then you go to the what we call the Copper Age, Dwapar Yuga, where things split into two, and this is where you have this concept of duality, where there is this conflict between soul and body. And that you are a soul, but you're in consciousness of the body. So you're split against yourself. And this is when negative karma arises. So negative karma carries on for the second half of the cycle, the Copper Age, the Iron Age, the Dwapar Yuga, the Kali Yuga. Now how are you going to go from totally depleted, totally dark, totally in negativity to the opposite, the Golden Age? Now, we don't say that there is pure karma in the Golden Age and Silver Age. We say there is pure karma in the Confluence Age. So the time when God is explaining pure karma is also mentioning here, you'll be released from evil. So evil means the force of negativity. We also feel that the knowledge of the Gita absolutely applies to the present day world. In the present day world, people have accumulated over many, many births a lot of negative karma. So everyone is in debt, everyone has lives in the atmosphere. I mean, if you can imagine, if you could hear all the negative thoughts and feelings of all the people on earth, it'd be awful. But that's the atmosphere in which we live, because it goes out into the air, and it's a sort of a pollution that we live in. that affects people. Some people are very sensitive to vibrations, you know, and they can't operate in bad vibrations. God comes in that, and you're in that. And he says, okay, you have to resist. In a sense, fighting means you have to resist all this negativity. You have to neutralize it. And you neutralize it by performing pure karma. So pure karma occurs only in this short period that we call the confluence age. And the result of that is the evil is completely neutralized. So this is how I interpret you'll be released from evil.
The next shloka that grabbed my attention is one that reintroduces the subject of excluding desire and motive. He who has excluded desire and motive from all his enterprises and has consumed his karma in the fire of knowledge, him the wise men call a sage. Now, Sister Denise, the thread that one picks up in chapter 4 is that God is saying, pay very careful attention to your karma. Why is it so difficult to understand this firstly, and more importantly, look at your own life and put it into practice?
If you do well at something and you get success, it's going to corrupt you.
Oh, yes. You can't say something like that and expect me not to ask another question. You have to repeat that, please. If you
do well at something, suppose you're in a spiritual practice, you do well, it's going to corrupt you.
Okay, Sister Denise, here's the thing. Mr. X is a cardiothoracic surgeon, and he's absolutely brilliant at it. Are you saying in that scenario his success will corrupt him as well?
Well, it can very easily, yes.
How so?
Well, because you start getting money, perks, bribes, presents, lots of nice looking ladies around you, you know.
So success
is a problem.
So
or you start getting greedy. Everything I do has to turn into money. I want to be a super multi-millionaire. It is very difficult for a person to be very successful and remain detached and remain simple and not get into all these temptations that come. Even you do a spiritual practice, you become successful, it is completely capable of corrupting you.
What causes the corruption?
Greed.
The desire for more.
Yeah. You know, everybody around you, oh, you're wonderful, marvelous and fantastic. Well, have a nice Ferrari,
So,
you know.
Sister Denise, is the success the problem or the ego behind the success?
Well, success takes the form of temptation, takes the form of maya, you know, illusion. Because you see, okay, suppose you engage in spiritual practice, and we see this a lot. There's a lot of people, they engage in spiritual practice, they become successful, they get corrupted. They start doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. And then there's a big scandal. And they fall. So, this is why, as you said, you have to watch your karma very, very closely, and you have to never take the result of your action as, oh my goodness, I'm successful. Guess what? You know, I have people eating out of my hand.
Okay,
so you have to renounce and renounce and renounce again and again and again.
Okay, what you just said is making me hot under the collar. So, you're not saying be a failure, are you?
No, you have to be a success. You must be a success.
Okay, success corrupts you, but you have to be a success.
Such a paradox. But you must never take it as, you know, I am successful. It's that ego. You're asking about ego. It is the ego that gets puffed up with success, you know, and this is why one has to be neutral around success and failure, you see, because in a way you're better off if you fail a lot. because then you have to shore yourself up. And then people who get a lot of success very quickly, who haven't had very much failure, they haven't had much experience of managing themselves in the face of failure. So in a way, it's much better to fail a lot and then get success later on. They say the same in Hollywood. You know, I used to live in Hollywood. If you're a really good film actor and your success comes late, you're likely not to get corrupted by it because you've had so much time not being a success. But people who become an overnight success or very quickly they are successful, they tend to get, because they're immature, they don't have the background to manage it, you see. So I think the same in anything really. If you can reach your success slowly and you learn how to be a good quality human being around the not having success. I mean, you're not an abject failure, but you have to keep striving for a long time. And on the way you learn enough to be able to handle the success when it finally comes.
I'm going to read the next 2 verses to you. I want you to give me your take on it. He who has abandoned all attachment to the fruits of action, always content, not dependent, even when performing action, does in effect nothing at all, performing action with the body alone, without wish, restrained in thought and self.
Mm-hmm.
With all motives of acquisition abandoned, he incurs no evil. I know you covered this before because this is a recurring theme throughout the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
But could you explain its relevance in respect of the topic of this chapter, which is yoga of renunciation of action in knowledge?
I think it also gives us a good insight. You've got God saying, I am a non-doer.
Mm-hmm.
You also become a non-doer. You have to become like me to become a non-doer. That means whatever I do is without desire, without attachment. I don't anyway get any reward for it. You do get a reward for it, but you have to act as if you don't. You have to be really free from these energies of success and failure, the energies of achievement, great, huge achievement, and the energy of illusion, delusion, which totally crushes and destroys the soul. Of course, the soul is indestructible, but the quality of the soul is totally corrupted by it. And as you rise in terms of your spiritual caliber, these 2 energies become more intense. It doesn't get any easier, it gets more difficult. And the higher you fly, the further it is that you can fall. And the likelihood of falling is, in a way, increased because it becomes more of a fragile position as you get higher and higher. So I think that it's very, very relevant and helps us to understand that God is saying, this is me, this is how I am, and you can become like this too. I will explain to you how. This has to be your relationship with success and failure, your relationship with your karma. You must do karma absolutely neutrally. And in Brahma Kumaris Rajyoga, we hear a lot about doing karma as an instrument and really refraining from taking credit and saying, I did this, I am so wonderful, marvelous and fantastic. Because if you take that, you succumb to the temptation of that. The law of spirituality says you have to take the opposite. So the neutrality is the one thing that enables you to actually rise to the height of God. And the renunciation of the fruit of action while doing action. I think we would describe the chapter in that way.
So Denise, the word Brahman comes up in verse 24. Brahman is the oblation poured out by Brahman into the fire of Brahman. Brahman is to be attained by him who always sees Brahman in action. Would you explain to us what Brahman is?
Yeah, you hear this a lot in context of the concept of the omnipresence of God. And so if you look at this shloka where the doer and the done to and everything is Brahman, what they say is Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. Brahma Satya means Brahman is true and the world is false. So that means anything material is not real, and by contrast anything non-material is real. Now there is an all-pervasive energy that moves through everything, which we call the energy of matter, but which some people say is the energy as well as the energy of matter, the energy of souls, the energy of God. It's all one thing. A little bit similar to what science says about the energy of matter, that energy is in everything, and that solid objects actually are not as solid as you think. This is very much that idea. However, in Brahma Kumaris Rajyoga, we don't look at it like that. We will say God, Supreme Being, is a separate, independent energy. Each and every human soul and every other soul is a separate energy. And then there's the energy of matter, which corresponds very much to this Brahman, but which is not the soul and which is not God. And then what happens in the human world or on the planet Earth is the interplay between the energy of God, the energy of souls, and the energy of matter. So this is how we look at it. So this verse would correspond, I suppose, to the Vedic concept of things. If you go back to this phrase, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, it's the motivation for those yogis who say, the world is false, Maya is false, the body is false, everything is false, and I choose to leave the world and go to the element of light and stay there and deny the reality of all this. It's an illusion.
So Denise, the subject of sacrifice and offering comes up again. And what I find interesting is souls who offer aspects of themselves, more particularly when it comes to the offering of, or rather the giving up of negative traits within you via the senses, is appreciated by God. I'm referring particularly to verse 26, which reads, "Others offer senses like hearing and the fire of restraint. Still others offer sound and other objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Others offer all actions of the senses and actions of the vital breath in the fire of yoga of self-restraint, which is kindled by knowledge." Please explain to the viewer how offering and sacrifice fits into the picture of renunciation of action and knowledge. We've heard it in the previous chapter, but please explain its contextual significance.
Yeah, this is all about how to do akarma, neutral karma. There are a lot of different hatha yoga practices, pranayama, fasting, so many things. This is all in the belief that by doing this restraint, this constraint, this will enable you to overcome the body and transcend the body. And this is talking about that because what they want to do is to get to that karmatit place where you go to nirvana and you don't come back.
Sister Denise, I see we have a time constraint, so I will have to say goodbye to you today. And I do want to thank you for giving myself and the viewer such a fresh approach to the understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, because whatever I've read, I certainly did not interpret it in the way you just shared. And this goes not for this episode, but for everyone we've done so far. So thank you for that. Okay, so there you go. Sister Denise has shared her views on what is meant by offering, what is meant by sacrifice, how she understands the various shlokas contained in this part of chapter 4. And you'll find that Sister Denise's interpretation of it is vastly different from yours, and also vastly different from any interpretation you've heard before. And the best thing about it is that the message that she has elicited from her understanding of chapter 4 is that God is saying to Arjuna, and through Arjuna to you, please be careful about your karma. Take care with the way you speak and the way you behave, because it all comes back to you. So this is a very powerful message for each and every one of us watching, and I do hope that you are able to take what was shared today home to your own life and to your family, and improve the quality of your life. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sister Denise. Take care and goodbye.